The world is on fire right now, and Washington knows it. What you're watching unfold in real time, from the skies over Tel Aviv to the corridors of the Pentagon, is not just another Middle East crisis. This is the unraveling of a geopolitical architecture that the United States spent decades constructing, and at the very center of this unraveling is a weapons pipeline that most American mainstream media will not explain to you with the clarity it deserves. North Korea and Iran, two nations that Washington has sanctioned, isolated, demonized, and repeatedly threatened, have been building one of the most consequential strategic partnerships of the 21st century, right under the noses of every intelligence agency in the Western world. And now, with missiles raining on Tel Aviv and the Pentagon scrambling, that partnership is no longer theoretical. It is operational. It is kinetic. It is reshaping the power balance of an entire region in ways that will echo for generations. You need to understand this not through the filter of fear, but through the lens of history, economics, and the cold logic of survival that drives nations Washington chose to push into a corner. Let's go back to the beginning, because nothing in geopolitics makes sense unless you understand its roots. The relationship between Pyongyang and Tehran did not start last year or the year before. This partnership was forged in fire, quite literally, during the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, when Iran was desperate for weapons and North Korea was one of the very few nations willing to sell. That is where it all began, with Soviet-style Scud missiles flowing from Korea to Iran, and with Iranian engineers learning, studying, absorbing every piece of technology they could extract from those early transactions. Analysts like Bruce Bechtold, a former intelligence officer with the US Defense Intelligence Agency who spent years tracking exactly this pipeline, have documented the arc of this relationship with extraordinary precision. He tells us that virtually all of Tehran's ballistic missile arsenal is sourced, derived, or inspired by North Korean technology. Every single generation of Iranian missiles traces its lineage back to Pyongyang. That is not an exaggeration. That is the documented historical record. Think about what that means for a moment. When you hear about Iranian missiles striking Tel Aviv, when you see the footage of Iron Dome interceptors lighting up the night sky over central Israel, when you read about cluster munitions spreading across residential neighborhoods in Ramat Gan and Holon, those missiles are North Korean in origin, North Korean in design, North Korean in their fundamental engineering DNA. The gem that has hit American facilities in the Gulf, an upgraded Scud-C, North Korea shipped around 200 of those to Iran starting in 1986 and then built the factory that continues producing them to this day. The longer-range systems hitting deeper into Israeli territory, the Ahmad, the Ghadar, are direct derivatives of the No-Dong family. The ballistic missile Pyongyang sold to Iran in the late 1990s in quantities of roughly 150, and then again built the production facility on Iranian soil. Bechtold describes them with clinical precision. Those missiles have been fired a lot at Israel. Simply derivatives of the No-Dong. Simple words. Devastating implications. Now we fast forward to February 28, 2026, the day this war began. And you have to understand the context in which it exploded. The United States and Israel launched a surprise attack on Iran during the middle of nuclear negotiations. Let that sink in for a second. During negotiations, the supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed. Iranian officials were assassinated. Civilian infrastructure was struck. And within hours, Iran activated what it had spent decades preparing, Operation True Promise of Fall. Ballistic missiles and drones began raining on Israel, on American bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. The Strait of Hormuz was closed, choking 20% of the world's oil and gas supply. And through all of it, the missiles kept flying, many of them traced directly back to that decades-long North Korean pipeline. The scale of what has happened in just 6 weeks of this war is staggering when you lay out the numbers, honestly. Iran launched 90 missiles at Israel on the very first day alone, then 65, then 25. The numbers came down, but the missiles themselves got bigger, got heavier, got more precise. A missile struck a building in Tel Aviv on the opening day, killing a civilian woman and injuring 22 others. On March 1st, an Iranian strike hit a synagogue and residential buildings in Beit Shemesh. 9 people killed, 49 wounded. On April 4th, cluster munitions from an Iranian ballistic missile spread across central Israel, striking near the IDF's Kiryat headquarters in Tel Aviv itself. Iranian missiles have struck Haifa, Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, Holon, Bat Yam, Rehovot. Iran has fired ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia, the remote British-American military base in the Indian Ocean, a weapon system it acquired from North Korea back in 2005. Iran struck Kuwait's power and desalination plants with drones. It damaged government buildings in Kuwait City. it hit Bahraini petrochemical facilities. The reach of this Iranian response, built on decades of North Korean missile technology, has been truly astonishing in its breadth. And here is where the story gets even more complex and where you need to pay attention very carefully. Because while the Pentagon is running daily bombing campaigns against Iranian missile launchers, underground facilities, and production sites, while American B-1s and B-2 bombers are making runs deep into Iranian territory, while 17 Iranian warships have been reported destroyed, while over 1,000 targets have already been struck, American intelligence is simultaneously admitting something uncomfortable. Iran has preserved a notable amount of its missile capability. Tehran has been so clever in deploying decoys that Washington cannot be fully certain how many real launchers have been destroyed. Iranian personnel are reportedly digging out underground missile bunkers from the rubble and bringing them back into operation within hours of being struck. The New York Times cited U.S. intelligence assessments that essentially acknowledge the limits of what this air campaign has achieved. You spent 40-plus days bombing a country, and you still cannot say with confidence that you have broken its missile force. That is the legacy of 40 years of North Korean engineering assistance, underground facilities built to survive exactly this scenario. North Korea did not just sell Iran missiles. It sold Iran the entire doctrine of missile survivability, the tunnels, the underground silos, the dispersal tactics, the hardening of launch sites, the mobile launchers, the decoys, everything that makes Iran's missile force so incredibly difficult to destroy from the air is a product of North Korean counter-bombardment know-how transferred to Tehran over decades. North Korean mining entities helped dig out an entire network of underground facilities for Iran's defense. That is what you are actually watching play out over the skies of Tel Aviv every night. You are watching the product of a 40-year strategic investment by two nations that Washington treated as pariahs, and in doing so pushed them into each other's arms with a kind of geopolitical inevitability that should have been obvious to anyone paying attention. Now let us talk about the economic dimension of this, because it is inseparable from the military reality and it is almost never discussed properly. North Korea earns approximately $3 billion a year from its arms relationship with Iran. That revenue has been a lifeline for the Kim regime, helping keep the Pyongyang government financially afloat in the face of crushing international sanctions. But Russia now pays significantly more, around $20 billion annually, for North Korean weapons used in Ukraine, so Pyongyang has multiple revenue streams flowing simultaneously. The loss of Iran as a customer, if the Iranian regime were to collapse, would still represent a serious financial blow to North Korea. This means Kim Jong-un has a direct economic interest in Iranian military survival. Think about the incentive structure here. North Korea profits when Iran fights, when Iran resists, when Iran depletes Western air defense stockpiles and forces Washington to spend down its interceptor reserves on the other side of the planet. The more missiles Iran fires at Tel Aviv and at American bases, the more the Pentagon has to replenish its PAC-3 Patriot and THAAD stockpiles. Every Iranian salvo is, in a very real strategic sense, a North Korean product advertisement and a drain on American military resources simultaneously. This is what geopolitical analysts in Washington should be talking about, and mostly are not. The way in which the CRINC bloc, that informal Western shorthand for the China-Russia-Iran-North Korea alignment, functions not as a formal military alliance, but as an ecosystem of mutual benefit and strategic convergence. Russia bankrolls North Korea through weapons purchases, while North Korea supplies Russia with artillery shells and ballistic missiles for Ukraine. Iran benefits from North Korean missile technology, while North Korea benefits from Iranian petrodollars. China provides the economic backstop and the diplomatic cover for all of it. None of these nations is an ideological soulmate of the others. What binds them is a shared experience of American sanctions, American military pressure, American-led attempts at regime change. Washington created this coalition through its own foreign policy choices over decades. Every sanction, every military threat, every covert operation pushed these nations closer together. And now, in April of 2026, the results of those choices are visible in real time over the burning skies of Tel Aviv. Let us talk about what is being claimed regarding the Hwasong-31 transfer, because this is where things move from documented history into territory that is highly contested but impossible to dismiss. Reports surfacing in early April 2026 allege that Iran has received a significant quantity of Hwasong-31 intercontinental ballistic missiles from North Korea, transported secretly through China and Russia. The Hwasong-31 is North Korea's most sophisticated solid-fuel ICBM. It is road mobile, meaning it can be hidden, moved, and launched with very little preparation time. It uses solid fuel, meaning unlike older liquid fuel systems, it does not require lengthy pre-launch fueling procedures that satellites can detect. And its range is extraordinary. It can theoretically reach anywhere on Earth. These claims have not been confirmed by American or Israeli official sources. But analysts with deep knowledge of the Iran-North Korea relationship, like Bruce Bechtel, have already documented the transfer of the Hwasong-31's 80-ton rocket booster technology to Iran going back to 2013, with subsequent shipments following even as the JCPOA nuclear negotiations were supposedly winding down. The US Treasury Department sanctioned Iranian companies and individuals in 2016 for violations related to these exact transfers. So the architecture for this kind of deal, of the channels, the networks, the logistics, has existed and been actively used for over a decade. Whether the specific number being cited is accurate or represents information warfare is almost beside the point. The fundamental reality that Iran possesses North Korean-derived ballistic missile technology of increasing sophistication, that this technology is surviving a sustained American bombing campaign, and that Tehran has demonstrated the willingness and capability to use it against Israel and against American assets across 9 countries, that reality is not in dispute. That is confirmed fact. American intelligence assessed that Iran maintained over 3,000 ballistic missiles of varying ranges before this conflict began, even with weeks of sustained American and Israeli strikes targeting production facilities, underground launch sites, and mobile launches. Even with the destruction of sites like Kojir and Sharud, Iran has continued launching salvos. The missiles keep coming. That is the story. That is the testament to what North Korea built inside Iran over 40 years. And now consider what this means for the longer arc of this conflict and for American grand strategy. The Pentagon's war in Iran was supposed to be about destroying Iran's missile capability rapidly and decisively. Instead, what American intelligence is telling us is that the missile force has proven far more resilient than predicted. The underground facilities get bombed and then get dug out and restored within hours. The mobile launchers disperse before strikes arrive. The decoys fool satellite imagery. American interceptor stockpiles, PAC-3 Patriots, THAAD missiles, are being expended at rates that raise serious questions about sustainment. Analysts have already warned that the United States needs to rapidly replenish these stocks, not just for the ongoing Iran conflict, but because a depleted American missile defense arsenal creates vulnerabilities in other theaters, including the Pacific, where China and North Korea have expanded their own ballistic missile forces significantly. You cannot fight an attritional missile war in the Middle East and simultaneously project credible deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. That is the strategic mathematics that Washington is now being forced to confront. Iran has struck 9 countries. It has fired on Diego Garcia. It has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of global oil and gas flows, driving energy markets into turmoil. It has brought Hezbollah back into the fight from Lebanon. It has activated the Houthis in Yemen, who fired their first ballistic missile barrages at Israel since this war began in late March. Every single one of these capabilities has a North Korean fingerprint on it somewhere in its supply chain, its design lineage, or its operational doctrine. The story of North Korea and Iran is the story of what happens when Washington tries to contain nations through maximum pressure and refuses to engage in genuine diplomacy. It is the story of how sanctions and isolation do not prevent proliferation. They accelerate it because they create the economic incentives and the political solidarity that make weapons transfers mutually beneficial and strategically essential for the parties involved. The world that existed before February 28, 2026 is gone. The illusion that American and Israeli air power could swiftly neutralize Iran's military capacity has been shattered against the reality of 40 years of North Korean engineering embedded deep inside Iranian soil, inside underground bunkers, inside mobile launch vehicles dispersed across a country the size of Western Europe. Tel Aviv is on alert every night. American bases from Bahrain to Diego Garcia are on alert. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Global shipping routes are disrupted. And in Pyongyang, Kim Jong-un watches all of this with the cold satisfaction of a man whose country's weapons are performing exactly as advertised. On the most consequential battlefield of the 21st century, this is not the end of something. This is the beginning of a new and far more dangerous world order being written in fire and North Korean steel. And the sooner Americans understand what is truly happening, the better equipped they will be to demand the kind of clear-eyed foreign policy thinking that this moment desperately requires.